coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. And if you're just joining us here, come on over to twitch.tv/deepmindfulness, and we would love to see you there. Look, my mic is a new feature. You put it exactly where you want it, and then it just slowly moves to a different place. This is very advanced features here, folks. So lovely to see you. Glad you're here with us. And this is what I want to know. Where on earth are you coming from? What brings you here? And yeah, what's going on? Okay, let's make sure all my windows is open. Welcome everyone. It should begin to roll on in. Okay, here we go. Welcome from Brooklyn. Yeah, what's going on? What is new? What's happening? It does seem a little quieter than usual. I'm a little scooched back. Let's get this sucker a little more further forward. There we go. Please just stay in place, microphone, as it slowly drifts away. Cool. I think I know a solution. It's pretty manual. I'm just going to unplug these lights and put them on the other side of the cord, which will hold them in place just a little bit. This is definitely a jerry-rigged solution. Okay, let's see if that does it. It helps a little. Okay, folks, so what's going on? What is the haps? What's happening with you? How's your practice been? How's life been? I had a lovely session with a one-on-one student today, and we're probably going to be exploring some of that material related to today's topic, which is the various spectrums under which we experience a lot of our the phenomena of self and world, of time and space, these kind of things. Oh, hello, Jean from Brooklyn. Great to see you here. Thanks so much for joining us. We also have Lewis joining us from the UK. Thanks so much for being here. Nick just got home, sipping on some smooth, non-industrial strength matcha here from Karlstad. Lovely. Glad to hear that. 2020 here from the UK. Lewis, I should get myself a matcha to join the club. Yeah, exactly. If you want to be in the cool club, better get that muchacha. Good morning from Kingston, Ontario. Rory, great to see you here. Glad you are able to join us here. So let's see here. Let's see. I feel like we can't see the carpet well enough. I really do. This is our new tapestry, and I really do love this sucker, so I want to make sure it has appropriate levels of lighting. Love this sucker. I could be a little more this way. If I'm further this way, my microphone problem gets fixed then. It's sliding to the right. So that is fixed. So folks, I'm excited about today's meditation. Also curious, more people have had a chance to watch the session around debrief from my psychedelic journey. So curious if that is has brought up stuff for folks, curiosities, this kind of thing. Okay, excellent, folks. This is going to be a good time. Oh, I know what happened in the meantime, like why it is that I sound a little lower here. Microphone 2. Raquel has been messing with the dials so she can make some recordings. That's what I have to say. Precisely. 2. Folks. Okay, cool. So before we begin, any questions or anything coming up that we want to consider before we actually do the meditation, actually jump in? I've discovered I got to get Tomalin and Jarvish are watching this right now, so I want to make a note that I noticed that the delay time in the stream is around 20 whole seconds, and this makes real-time interaction a little challenging. It's partially why there's such a long delay when I ask a question. I'm always like, I guess people just aren't interested in that question. and then I move on, and then people are still answering, and this kind of thing. So I wanted to get that down. There's another platform, which I am not switching to a new platform now just because of this. But it's basically, its whole shtick is that the response time is super fast, so it's good for real-time interactions. But we're not going there. We're staying here. Ooh, I'm frozen. Okay. We think we've isolated the frozen issue. We hope we have. We're replacing a cord. I think we might be able to replace it today, which would be lovely. Okay, folks. When you're ready, finding a nice, comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the sit. That's going to be about 25 minutes. We're going to be meditating with still body position. Of course, you're not in meditation detention, at least not yet. And so we're going to allow ourselves to move if we need to, but we want to make sure that we're moving consciously. So we want to make sure that we're taking, 20 seconds, a minute, 5 breath cycles, some amount of time. Breath cycles are good because then we're just attending to the breath during that period. Some amount of time where we are not moving. Even if we intend to move, we need to move, we need to make an adjustment, making sure that we're slowly getting there, so we do so mindfully. 2020 CL says, struggling with self-compassion in meditation. Excellent. That is a great topic. Nick says, how is your previous experience with recreational? How was your previous experience with recreational psychedelics? It was recreational. That's basically that. It's very, very different than what I've been doing recently. It's definitely less, I think, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess time will tell, but it seems to be less impactful. It did give me a little bit of insight. There was some degree of, during the more intense experiences of psychedelics recreationally. What's that beeping? Oh, that's trucks outside. The microphone. Oh, what a cute place to get frozen. This is good. I think I should just keep it there. This should be my logo. So, recreation. Some of the more intense experiences showed me some of the material that might show up in meditation, but it was only through meditation that the system arrived there, rather than it being some kind of, few hour long peak experience. Getting equanimity in some of those more difficult places, like learning to manage, cooling out when the system's going crazy because things seem pretty crazy. I remember being at a concert once and being on, LSD, and someone was throwing up into a trash can, and from my view, because it was they probably drank a bunch of Kool-Aid or something like that, it looked like they were throwing up blood. And I looked and I was like, oh, that person's throwing up blood. I was like, you know what, not now. It's just like, whoosh. I was like, I'm going to direct the mind in a different direction, because while that is very appealing to think about, or, draws a lot of attention, I'm going to need the mind to be over here right now. So skills like that were helpful, but that's not something those are the kind of things you can develop in other ways as well. Okay, did you attempt to explore stuff or just for fun? When I use psychedelics recreationally, this freezing thing is quite popular these days. When I explored psychedelics recreationally, yes, there was a sort of vague sense of I'm going to explore some stuff. I wonder about this thing a little bit. But it wasn't that. The entire thing was structured around going down one route of exploration, and then letting anything that came into that route sort of inform that. It was much more sort of, who knows, crazy world, let's see what happens, and just have fun. It was more about having fun and exploring, that kind of thing. So the exploration was nice, sort of looking at the world and being like, wow, this is so cool. But there was this sort of torturous experience of not knowing what to do, because it's what do we do now? Okay, well, let's go to your house. Oh, I think we need, and that's very much not a part of this, because what you do is you explore and investigate this one thing. There's a way in which it's much simpler in that way. Okay, so folks, finding that nice comfortable position. And we're going to get ready here. And we'll begin. So settling into your meditation posture, we'll begin in just a moment. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths and just feeling the body rise and fall. Noticing wherever the body-mind is. Noticing if the mind is scattered or distracted. If the body is noticeable or is less noticeable. What sounds or thoughts are populating the mind now. Noticing that as we observe these, their momentum decreases. Their tendency to pull us into their narratives. And settling into the experience of having a body. Experientially acknowledging that body sensations exist. We might feel temperature in the body, gravity or the downward pulling force in the body. We might feel respiration or circulation. We might feel aches or pains in the body, discomfort, or even neutral sensations related to maintaining the posture. We may notice digestion in the body, often experiences various pressures along the digestive tract. And we may notice that there are areas of the body that have less sensation or no sensation. That the body is experienced as a patchwork of more or less intense areas. And there are many areas of the body where we currently don't detect anything. These areas are usually defined as areas surrounded by activity that have low or no activity. And we may notice emotion in the body. What I'd like us to do is gather all of these different sensations together in one large pool. We don't have to worry about making sure every little bit is included, just casting a wide net. What are all of the body sensations together now? Noticing, is there a sense that we're looking down towards body sensations, or that these sensations are the center of our experiential universe now? And one's not better than the other. It's just helpful to know which is primary, the sensation or the mind observing. And for now, we're leaning towards sensation being more primary. Increasing the intensity of awareness of these sensations until they become more of the center of our experience. Concerned less about where we're experiencing them than how richly we're experiencing them. perhaps noticing that the body doesn't need the mental narrative that we often accompany our experience with. In this way, the body experience is deeply silent. In this way, letting go of our usual spatial orientation, not forcing anything, just letting go of the need for the body to be below. Tuning into the raw sense data of body sensations. Letting them be effectively everywhere. Making a slight shift, letting go of any particular technique, just observing that at this point the system is oriented in some way. Perhaps there's a sense of a center, a sense of a world or environment around that center. Or perhaps it's more of an overall awareness with no real center to be found. And noticing whatever orientation is present, just treating this as natural, of course. This is the way this system is orienting at this moment. Noticing if the system is creating any preference. This moment may be like this, but some part of the system is preferring it to be different. Perhaps wanting a more peaceful or special meditation experience. Again, recognizing that this preferring is natural. It's simply the system organizing our experience in a certain way. And while one part of the system may have a preference or even a strong preference, other parts of the system likely have a less intense preference, more of a neutral experience. So seeing if you can observe this spectrum of preferring. Noticing if we judge and assess one as better than the other. Perhaps preferring is less appealing and non-preferring seems more special. Just know that this is more of the same, preferring and non-preferring, both of which are quite natural. Noticing there's even a spectrum of what we describe as time. A sense of time marching forward. There's this moment and there were previous moments. And in some imagined future there will be a new moment. Part of the system orients us in this way. And part of us experiences the world as this everlasting present. None of these are better than the other. Noticing whatever elements of time orientation are arising, and if different preferences arise along with these, wanting, not wanting, liking, disliking, just observing those two as various expressions of the system orienting us on this spectrum. may even notice that there's a spectrum of particular selves. For instance, a self that can accept compassion. And an aspect of self that has a hard time accepting compassion. So I'm going to say a phrase and notice which part can easily accept the meaning of the phrase, which part resists. Perhaps the part that experiences it as a neutral. And know that I'm directing this phrase to you. I see you, and I'll care for you just the way you are. I see you, and I'll care for you just the way you are. Noticing this spectrum of acceptance and resistance. One may be stronger, one may be weaker. The spectrum of preference may arise as well. We may like one and dislike the other. Picking a phrase that feels nurturing, perhaps the same phrase or perhaps something different. And directing that phrase towards our experience of self, the me that we experience the world happening to. And observing this spectrum. Some part of us can allow this to enter and some part of us cannot. And rather than seeing these as opposed, as clashing, seeing these as part of a spectrum. Neither one better or more valuable than the other. Just nature. Noticing what happens when we don't need that resistant part. To accept anything. We don't need it to be different. We just allow it to exist on this spectrum of acceptance, the spectrum of resistance. And staying with the practice, staying in stillness, allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes, eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point, ideally one that is not text and not a screen. Taking a moment to observe these various spectrums, spectrum of space, of orientation, spectrum of time, of progression. The spectrum of preferring. And the spectrum of accepting compassion. And letting this awareness that we've cultivated, letting this be the great teacher that shows us how to bring this practice into every aspect of our life. Okay, so what was that experience like? Taking a moment to make any adjustments that you need to allow the body to be comfortable. Yes, when I tell people that you should practice in stillness, I really mean it. So still that it looks almost as though your camera is frozen. Oops. So what was that like? Lucis, thanks, man. When exploring the spectrum opposites, I get a sense of tension in my head and eyes. It can feel like the center point can bounce around, and then I can get into waves of rapid eye movement. Interesting. Not sure if it's just tension exaggerating itself or something to do with the process. Well, one thing to know often with tension in the eyes is that it can often be literally just that. It can often be the sense of where, we talk about the idea of concentration, that the mind is sort of focused on one thing. It can be that sort of sense of, I'm just trying to pay attention to this, and we're sort of, there's some micro furrowing of the brow and this kind of thing, and maybe the eyes are sort of moving around. If that's arising, it can often be as simple as just allowing the eyes to open just a tiny, tiny bit, and the eyes will orient and will sort of let go of some of that tension in the face. So it's possible that this body mind is not used to observing this material, and therefore it feels a little like a strain. So just be careful of unintentionally allowing a bit of strain into the system. That can arise. So what else came up for folks? Now that I've discovered that we have an almost 20-second delay here, I have a more compassion for folks who take a few moments to hear the question and then write their report. So Write your report to me in the future. Hello, beings in the past. This is Janusz requesting your report. What was your meditation like? What happened and what are you like now? For me, that was quite interesting because as I started, when 2020 CL said that they're struggling with self-compassion in meditation, I said, oh, that's great. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. But I had no idea how. I didn't know. I was like, I hadn't thought that through. And as I began the practice, I was talking about these sort of different various spectrums of sort of the system orienting itself and a center or sort of non-center or time or this kind of thing. And I'm sitting there going, how the hell does this relate to that? I can't even understand why I thought there was a relationship here. And it was funny to just sort of be like, well, maybe I'll not do that. Maybe maybe I thought I was going to get to that, but it makes no sense. And then as it approached, as we basically just before I started that section, it just became very clear. I was like, oh, of course, that's what I was talking about is this, set of spectrums. And I wanted to talk about the sort of compassion spectrum from that perspective. And this relates to the last stream where I talked about my psychedelic experience. And I started to realize that that the fact that I experienced that there are these two selves, one that feels like ashamed and not worthy and sort of like less valuable and that kind of thing. And then this other self that is sort of, defensive in the world and like, is like angry and pushes like, oh, like leave me alone, I'm frustrated, oh, this is so frustrating, like that self that it actually, and that self that it pushes against the judgmental self, that it pushes against that more vulnerable self. It says like, you shouldn't be here, we don't need that vulnerability, we don't that vulnerable thing isn't right, we're strong and we need control, this kind of thing. So one part that almost feels like it has no control, one part feels that it's like fighting for control. In a way, these are just on a spectrum, that it's actually, they're less opposed to each other than they are just an interaction between each other. And that they depend on each other to some degree, that in order for that self to feel like it's less worthy, there has to be some action within the system that is pushing it and saying you're not worthy. Sort of like if anyone's ever seen Wayne's World, very similar effect there. You're not worthy. So there's actually a push and pull between these things, and so observing that as simply a spectrum of being able to accept care and compassion, which the more vulnerable self doesn't want to. It's like, no, that's too much, that's too intense. It's not safe to accept that kind of care and compassion. I've tried to accept care and compassion in the past, and I've been injured or hurt, or there's been a downside to that. So I think I'm just going to lean back and not have that experience. That's one side. The other side is the side that is actually, I don't know if this is universal, but for me I realize is quite caring. That defensive and judgmental self is doing that because it wants to make my experience safer. It's trying to make me safer. It's trying to organize the world in a way where I can have a position of stability, maybe even if that stability is at the expense of, oh, this stuff is stupid or this thing's dumb, so I can create a hierarchy, so at least I can have the stability of being above something. The problem is that creating a hierarchy like that puts you immediately in a position where you are below other things. Hence the fight of that part of the ego, the need to continuously topple others and to sort of overpower. That it's not like you can, okay, I've gained power and now I'm stable there. I can rely on this level of power that I've cultivated and landed at. It's that I've gained this power and I need to just crush someone else. I need to put someone else. I'm being very sort of, I'm exaggerating. This is less so my experience, and I'm thinking about this on the far end of, sociopathic, the sociopathic level of what's the word I'm looking for? Self-absorbed narcissism. sociopathic narcissism, that we, see in our government in the United States. And I feel bad a little bit, because I feel like I don't want to like totally, if people are like big, supporters of our current administration, I don't want to be like, this guy is just a evil person. I don't think he's evil. I think it's very, very hard to deny that he is like extremely narcissistic and extremely like in need of a lot of external validation, his landscape is very much reliant on the outside saying that things are good and he is good and he's valuable. There's less of a sense of some inner core that says, I'm valuable by my very nature, by my existence, that I'm worthy of love, and I don't need to force the universe to give me that love. There is this sense of needing to force that. So I identify with that to some degree. So let's see here if I can move this screen without moving the camera. I can. Okay. I think this is Jean from New York, says, I've been feeling rather heavy lately, and when I reached the compassion, and I see you section, I had a sob. Well, I'm glad you're able to, I'm sorry that you felt a lot of potentially challenging emotion, but I'm glad that you're able to feel that and express that. I had to try to, I try to be kind and respectful to everyone I encounter, but lately I feel like I do not, like I'm not doing enough to change the world for the better. Yeah, and I think that that's an important place to observe, that we have X capacity as a human being. We have this much, which hand is up? Okay, so we have this much capacity as a human being to do anything in the world, to make a plate of eggs, or to change the world, or to do whatever. And often there's a sense of we want to have this capacity, or this capacity, or this capacity. And the gap between those two is how terrible of a person we are. This is what I call the piece of crap gap. The difference between where we are and where we should be is often the distance of judgment. It's the distance of how much we dislike ourselves, how much we judge our internal landscape. And so I think what's really one of the really important things is to recognize that that gap isn't a gap of your value. It's an imaginary gap. And we gain a great deal. And what we did today was have acceptance. Okay, there's part of me that can't accept the compassion. That's fine. There's part of me that can't, go out and change the world every time I want to, just snapping my fingers. I don't have that capacity. And the difference, and then there's a part of me that wants me to have that, I want to be, a great change agent in the world. Okay, that's fine. That's not a bad thing. And it's just the system orienting itself. It just wants X. It's on the wanting and accepting spectrum. And so part of my job is to recognize, oh, that wanting is natural. Yeah. And my limits are also natural. Of course, I have X limits. And part of what we're doing is we're reducing resistance to what actually is. And that gives us a great deal more resilience. Now, so it's a little bit of a funny thing. We accept, okay, this is actually where I am. This is what's up. This is okay. No need to fight that. And what that actually does is give us a little bit more leeway to have more resilience and ability to interact and change the world potentially. So it's a bit of a catch-22, but part of it is just accepting that what we're experiencing is nature. Nick says, detected wave-like scintillating misty sensations with effervescent bubbly quality appearing as flow through the absence of undulatory transcendence. Flow through absence of undulatory transcendence and the vanishing of past spacious itchy buttocks. Okay, sorry, just messing around. Confusion included. It's Wacky Wednesday. It is Wacky Wednesday, by the way. But that's how reports sound to me sometimes. engineers prefer nouns and numbers over rivers over a river of adjectives. Well, I'm curious, Nick, because I was going to respond to your report. So tell me if that report is actually what you experienced, and if not, then we can just skip it. I think that part of what we're getting at is that we're approaching. I think of another spectrum which I think is actually quite important, is our experience from noun to verb, and from object to non-object, which I actually think is, my experience is that they're very similar in their the structure of those two spectrums. So there's a way in which we can objectively describe our perceptual reality, and there's a way in which we can't, or it's beyond the sort of structure of words. Maybe we don't have the poetic, zhuzh to land that very well. Actually, what I want to do, I'm going to play a poem that is exactly attempt to navigate this exact range. So it's about the range between objectifying reality and the sort of spectrum that cannot be managed through the objective lens. Let's see. Trump is still trying to prove himself to his dad, and that's very much that's what it seems like. It's so interesting to me that when people who are supporters, it seems like they don't. Maybe they just think that's not important, but it seems strange to me that that they can't acknowledge that. So, okay. Nick says, on a serious note, I feel guilty for not doing enough too. So yeah, the price, the piece of crap gap is massive. But on the other hand, it also feels like I really don't I really am doing everything I can to help my family in these times. Conflicted opinions as expected. This multiple self model really changes my perspective on my mind. Yeah, I think it's a good sort of point to bring back what we talked about more explicitly about the multiple self model, that there are these different selves, that there are these different pushes and pulling sort of desires and needs. And part of what we want to do is recognize that all of those needs are valid. All of those needs are on a spectrum of how is that fitting? So all of these different needs are on let's just make it simple. All these needs, the underlying need is valid. The execution of them is often problematic. So there's part of us that wants to just relax, and there's part of us that wants to go out and protest. So for me, I found that I want to protest every day. There was protests in New York. I want to be there every day, and I can't if I want to sustain my life and I want to be able to donate. And Raquel and I donate to various political causes. And if we want to have the, if we want to have our contributions actually occur and support folks in these ways, we actually have to maintain, doing our jobs and living our lives in this way. So there has to be a balance. So partially it's to accept that, all of these drives are natural, and then it's also partially our job to find a way to meet those needs in a way that will scratch that itch, so to speak. So if there's part of us that wants to be active, what is a way that we can be active? I mean, the thing that I recommended here in the United States was the Adopt a State system, which I highly recommend. If someone wouldn't mind, just so, because it'll just slow down the whole stream. It's let's see, Vote Save America, and it's Adopt a State. If somebody would put the link for Vote Save America and Adopt a State in the chat, that would be awesome. In the United States, it's also PS. Anyone can use this because it's it's a tool to learn how to organize, and this very simple set of tools in order to be more active. And because it's so simple, and because it's so straightforward, it becomes very easy. One of the things they said on a recent training call was that if, each person listening to the call, thank you for that. Thank you for that little piece there. Vote Save America, and then the link is to Adopt a State. And one of the things they said is if, each person listening to this call just spoke with 5 people and got them to consider, these are people who are maybe on the fence. I don't know if I'm going to vote or not. I don't know who I'm going to vote for, and just told their own personal story and said, hey, listen, this is where I was. For me, it's like I could talk about how, my mom and dad were immigrants, and they came here, and because they were allowed to work really hard, my dad was an engineer, my mother was a nurse, they contributed to the country, and they made me want to contribute to the country. And so because of that, I want to support people who are immigrants to come into the country. That story, thank you so much for that added addition there. So because of that, I decided the way that I want to vote, because I support that. So just telling my own personal story is enough. And that's actually what they suggest you do, is tell your own personal story. So very, very simple. And if I can talk to 5 people and get them to say, okay, maybe I will vote after all, just that is enough to turn an election. And it sounds like, oh, sure it is, but it's no, like they just show the numbers and they said, no, that will actually, that's the difference of what the loss in the election was last time, just 5 people. So I can make it this is chunking it down to something very, very simple. I can make it my mission to say, okay, I think I could probably talk to 5 people. I could probably get 5 people to decide to vote, because these are people who are registered or they're considering voting, but they're not sure if they want to. I could probably get 5 people to do that, and that's actually a really reasonable task. I have 5 months, and that I don't think that's too impossible. So making it a small task. And another thing that's worth mentioning, I'm just remembering that Raquel and I are going to be working on an entire series on how to use meditation techniques to orient us to be the most, or rather the sort of have the least resistance in experiencing the world of activism and the world of acting in that way. And I think I see Raquel way over here. She looked over when I mentioned her name. Did you want to say something, Raquel?
No, yeah, I'm excited for that.
Raquel says she's excited for that. So, wow, that was very quick. The camera just froze a second later. This is very impressive, the freeze time we have now. Let's count it down, 1,000. So that's what I would generally say for that. That's my general sort of toolkit for those pieces. So yeah, any other questions or reports, anything else coming up for folks that they want to mention? I just want to give a shout out here for Jean for putting that link up. Jean, you're our hero today. Thank you so much for that. In fact, Jean, you're such a hero that this plant right here, which no one can really read because it's basically out of focus now, we're going to bring out our other plant that is actually very similar to this one. Visually, just looks very similar, but it is different because that one is named Jean. We have a large, vast warehouse of plants, all of which are identical with different names on them, and we have to have a lot because there's a lot of different names. So tomorrow, or rather Friday, when we come back to the stream, the plant named Jean will be right here. Thank you for that kind support. Nick says, yeah, well, I was actually trying to describe my experience but got stuck in the first sentence, so I went with a flow and just started writing the most fancy adjective available in my limited vocabulary. Good point. Grassroots activism is deaf, not useless, which some suggest. Yeah, no, it's very, very, very much not. And also, P.S., I want to mention, Nick, that what you described, right? You started to describe your experience, and then there was a struggle, and it sounds like part of what came up was a self that like judges descriptions that are they're too mystical schmystical, or they're too adjective oriented. This is my theory, and tell me if this is, you identify with this, or if this is just total prognostication. You were being sincere and were trying to describe something and struggling, and another part comes in and says, this is stupid, why are you doing this, this is dumb, trying to tamp that side down that's sort of vulnerable and talking about your experience in a sort of open way. That side comes in and starts to push that down, and that's the same self that judges other people for their their descriptions that feel overly adjective laden. So just to consider, One, that there is potentially, this may or may not be the case, um, there is one self that was trying to be vulnerable and trying to explain kind of what was happening, and it was like excited. Okay, I can't wait to explain the world, almost like childlike. Look what happened. This is my experience. Totally valid self. Maybe a little nervous about being hurt, right? Because it makes sense. Then there's another self that arises, also not a bad self, a protector self that says this isn't safe. That's not a safe position to have. You should quiet down. A much more safe position to have is of judgment and say, no, this is not good. This is good. These are the kind of people who are low. These are the kind of people who are high, and I'm on the high side of that perspective. Again, this is the hierarchy that we were describing before. Again, I don't want anyone to think that this is actually Nick's experience. This is total prognostication and might be much more my experience than anyone else's. And so that part sort of wins, but if possible, to recognize these parts are sort of on a spectrum, that they're actually both totally acceptable, that the part that's protecting is actually trying to care in a way that requires judgment, or it thinks it requires judgment, it thinks it has to be vigilant in this way. And the part that is trying to be vulnerable and maybe doesn't know quite what to say, in a way relies on that judgmental part in order to feel like it's embattled and it's scared and oh man, because in order for it to feel vulnerable that way, there has to be some part in the system that is pushing down on it. So I don't know if that relates to your experience. It very much connects with my experience, and that's kind of exactly what I described in the last live stream when I talked about my psychedelic journey in that way. Rory says, I know these two selves. I know. For me, they're becoming clearer and clearer in that way. Nick says, oh, I nailed it. Oh, well, hey, I like nailing it. Exactly what happened. I just got judged harshly by lots of selves, IRL previously, for being too vague. And vague is very negative in my circle and family. Yeah, and just know that what happens is we internalize these dynamics. If, like, I get driven crazy by certain people who are like mean and judgmental, or like who are like narrow, they're like, like, I don't need you, blah, 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 like, and there's a way in which I'm internalizing that. That one of the reasons why it's so triggering for me is I've internalized that, and I don't like that part of myself. The part of myself that judges other people and is like very dismissive and that's stupid. From one perspective, I'm like, I hate that part. God, I wish that were gone. Jesus, what a terrible part. But the problem is that's just more judgment. I had a student once a long time ago. It's not really a student. This is someone I was helping in sobriety. And I said, it sounds like you're really hard on yourself. And they said, oh my God, you're right. I'm such an idiot. And, the system has a hard time seeing outside of itself. So just know that 2020 CL talked about having a hard time accepting compassion. Just know that there's part of you that can accept that compassion and accept that more vulnerable self. The part of you that can accept compassion, and that more vulnerable self might be the part that cannot. And just know that right now it can't, or it feels resistant, or it feels like that feels like scary. But just know that resistance is out of trying to keep you safe. So it's actually a pretty caring position. It's a pretty caring perspective. It cares. It's like, I want to keep you safe, so I'm going to sort of try to keep keep you from having receiving this kind of compassion. So it's at some point we can recognize that all of these different parts are actually caring for us. They're nurturing us. They're trying to protect us, and that's actually that's a route to start to connect with this sort of more universal experience of love. Like, oh wow, all of these parts are actually there to protect me, to care for me, and there are people who care for me, and there are people who have work to give me resources and work to support me in these different ways, just as a way to orient the system into allowing and experiencing care in that way. Rory says, that's what definitely holds me back at times. Yeah, I totally understand, and that's exactly my experience. And I'm just very glad to be. I mean, what's fun for me is going through this experience right now, very publicly. And I want to mention, let's highlight here. And I'm probably missing some folks, but 2020 CL talked about having a hard time accepting compassion. That is a brave thing to do publicly, right? Rory talking about that's the part that holds you back. Very brave, doing that publicly. Nick talking about these different selves and talking about judgment that occurs in life. Let's give ourselves a little credit and say that it's significant that we're willing to allow ourselves to have that conversation, to let that experience occur. If you're listening to this and you're just noticing, okay, maybe some of this rhymes with my experience, if you're watching this on a playback, oh yeah, there is some identification there, and you can connect with that. Allow, if you can, the recognition that that's significant, that we're allowing ourselves to experience this. And so that comes up because I want to say thank you for the opportunity to navigate this material publicly, basically. I've been navigating this for quite a long time, and I'm doing this process relatively publicly. And it's interesting because for me, the shape of this sort of public report of what's happening internally for me, the shape of that and what I'm doing in terms of, activism, and what I'm doing in terms of, my own internal experience and the sort of psychedelic work and the meditation, it's in the shape of helping other people. That's okay. I'm here to teach meditation, etc. But just know that for me, it's very much a sort of ongoing feedback loop, and recognizing, wait a minute, just by being honest about my own experience, by being vulnerable, by using what talents I have, by smashing up against the talents that I could use improvement on, doing that with you, it seems to be helpful, not only for myself, but from what people tell me, it's helpful for them too. So for me, that's a model of how to have an impact on the world, is to go through your process, and to whatever degree you're willing to sort of talk about that externally, your process is the one that's actually going to help people. So that is that. I do want to, what I want to do? I want to pull up this poem and I want to watch this together. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it. Is it? Oh, did I find it like real quick? No, that's an hour and a half long video. Should we go with the hour and a half long video? Is that what we're looking for? Okay, let me see here. I'm going to, nope, don't want that. Each one of these is 10 minutes. I think it's...
Pieces are all we get of the picture.
Okay.
Only fragments.
Okay, I can find this poem. I swear to God, I can find it. No. Okay, next. I'm getting there, folks, I swear.
Something about acid rain.
Has anyone, what's it called? Has anyone seen the movie Mind Walk? Mind Walk is one of those weird films from the 90s, 80s, 90s, where the entire story takes place just people chatting. And about philosophy, about life, this kind of thing. And this section, I'm trying to find, literally scrubbing through an entire movie here, in 10-minute increments. Yeah, they just walk around and talk. Damn it. I'll try this. Oh, damn, there's no way I'll find this poem. Okay, here we go. I think I got it. Got him. Okay. Ooh, that's loud.
You asked me what...
Jeez Louise, that sounded terrible. Okay, folks, I'm so close.
Tell you that the ocean...
Okay. Let's check the volume so we're in a good position. Okay, I'm going to crack this open here so we can see it. Thanks for bearing with me. It took me a minute to find that sucker. Okay, share screen. Window capture. Hello. Nothing. Nope, not that. Monitor 2. There we go. Boom. Okay. Here we are. I gotta get the volume correct. So the first thing he says, basically, okay, here's the poem, and this is what I was talking about before. This is about the argument that Nick was talking about between objective observation and that which cannot be captured by the sort of notion of objective observation. It's fairly poetic, so it's going to be sort of abstract in a certain way. So just know that it's not meant to make like logical sense. It's meant to be more sort of evocative of something that cannot be put into words. He's talking about someone who is observing the world through a scientific lens, and I think the first thing he says, I'm going to check volume and I'll start it again.
You asked me what the lobster is weaving down there.
So the first thing he says is, you asked me what the lobster is weaving down there. And that's, in a sense, he's trying to talk about a scientist looking precisely exactly what is this lobster doing, like what's its exact behavior. So someone observing the behavior of the lobster. I'm going to turn this up a little bit, see if we can match the volume. It's a little quieter than myself, so just know that.
You asked me what the lobster is weaving down there with its golden feet. I tell you, the ocean knows this. You say, who is the Ascidia waiting for in its transparent bell? I tell you, it's waiting for time, like you. You say, who does the macrocystis algae hug in its arms? Study it. Study it at a certain hour in a certain sea, I know. You question me about the wicked tusk of the narwhal, and I respond by describing to you how the sea unicorn, with a harpoon in it, dies. You inquire about the kingfisher's feathers, which tremble in the pure springs of the southern shores. I want to tell you that the ocean knows this, that life in its jewel boxes is endless as the sand, impossible to count, pure, and the time among the blood-colored grapes has made the petal hard and shiny, filled the jellyfish with light, untied its knot, letting its musical threads fall from a horn of plenty made of infinite mother of pearl. I'm nothing but the empty net which has gone on ahead of human eyes, dead in the darknesses, of fingers accustomed to the triangle, longitudes on the timid globe of an orange. I walked around like you, investigating the endless star. And in my net during the night I woke up naked. The only thing caught? A fish. Trapped inside the wind. Pablo Neruda.
So I personally love that poem. When I describe it to others, or when I've played it for others in classes, and people have been like, what the hell? Like, what the hell is that? So that is, that's that today. So folks, I have a wish for you. And that wish, my friends, is that today you're able to connect with the lovely experimental world of existence, to notice the spectrum between the narrative self that's so insistent and needy and that which doesn't need those structures, that the elegance and beauty of being a human is able to exist right alongside our need to make the coffee or get our vitamins, and letting this duality melt away, letting us revel in this spectrum. This magic world that we have limited access to that will end unceremoniously. But not yet. Not yet. So I look forward to seeing you right here, right now, in a different now, in fewer than 48 hours. And I deeply appreciate all of your time and effort and work. Thank you so much for joining. It's so lovely to have you here. Have fun, everyone. Have a lovely day, and as Nick always says,